Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope that everybody's doing really well. Today I wanted to talk about what happens when your plants get too much light. So it's something that I've been experiencing at the moment, and so I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about this. What are the telltale signs of a houseplant or plant that has way too much light? So as some of you may know, I do use grow lights, and the main ones that I use are from Spider Farmer. I've done videos with them in the past and I've had a really good experience with their grow lights. They are super powerful. So for most of my kind of mad houseplant journey, I was living in a house that didn't have a super high amount of natural light. It did have some, and it did have skylights, which were super helpful, but it didn't have any massive windows, and so I kind of supplemented my lighting conditions with grow lights. Now these grow lights are used for growing certain things as well as lots of vegetables and stuff, and so they're really powerful. You can grow fruit under them. They're great for seedlings and houseplants as well, but houseplants generally need less light. So what I have found is in the new house that has some pretty big lovely windows, the plants are adjusting to that, and while I've still been using the grow light, it is turned down, but I have been noticing a lot of my plants experiencing just way too much light. So while that's been happening, I thought it would be a great idea to show you these plants and basically the signs that I saw and what made me come to the conclusion that these issues were due to my plants getting just way too much light. So this may relate to you, whether you have plants too close to windows, whether you have grow lights that are too strong or your plants are too close to them, or those of you in hotter countries or countries that have a lot of very strong sun. Tip number one is the one that I noticed the most in my houseplants and what they were dealing with, and that is bleached leaves. So this can mean like chlorotic leaves, and chlorotic basically just means yellowing leaves or leaves that have lost their colour. Some plants have shown that their veining is more pronounced, like my Hoya polynora, and it results in the loss of the natural colour of the leaves. So this isn't necessarily like burnt leaves, it's just that their colour is affected. Now the plant is growing okay, but over time this can cause stress and it can cause damage to the tissue in the leaves. As I said, this was the thing that I experienced the most with noticing that my houseplants were getting way too much light. The colour was just off, they were becoming much more bleached or yellow, and the chlorophyll, the green colour in the leaves just wasn't, it was just fading and fading over time. Sign number two is leaf burn. Now this will be maybe a bit more obvious than like bleached leaves, but this is basically where the leaf gets totally burnt up from too much light. Now when you think of burned, you probably think like charred or crispy and things like that, and this can happen, but the burned leaves that I've experienced, they just totally become white, they become like see-through, total loss of all colour of the leaves, and the leaf is basically dead. Now if left for a longer amount of time, this will eventually kind of brown and crisp up and fall off, but at the beginning you might just notice that the leaf is just totally white. This can be white, can be yellow, it can be a little bit brown as well, but the leaf is basically so unable to take in this light that the tissue has just totally died. Now this will mainly happen if it is very close to a window that has way too much sun, or it's really close to a grow light, which is what happened in my experience. It was actually my heartleaf philodendron that I noticed this on first. And you see the way it's kind of vining around, it just went the other way and went super close to the Spider Farmer grow light, and I lost a leaf or two. Sign number three that you may notice, and I'm looking at the Calatheas, Jupertias, Marantas, Stromanthes, and these plants would generally do this, is the leaves curling in. Now this can also mean that the plant is too dry, and it's curling in to protect or to hold in further moisture. So you're going to have to kind of play detective with that one. First, maybe check if the plant is too dry, maybe it just needs water, or it can mean that the plant is being exposed to way too much light. And this basically is a mechanism where the plant is reacting to the light and it is curling in the leaves so that the plant is curling in the leaves so that the leaves are no longer exposed to that high amount of sun. So it's trying to protect itself. I'm not sure how long that will last or how successful that is, but it is one thing that I noticed with, in particular, my Stramanthe Triastar, my little baby one. So the signs are getting just a little bit less obvious as we go along, but sign number 4 is that the plant needs more water. This is something that I have experienced so much in my new space. Obviously, how much water a plant needs is also affected by humidity and the growing conditions that it is in, but it can be a symptom of a plant getting too much light. So when a plant is undertaking photosynthesis, it takes in light and it makes food, it needs water for that process, and so the more photosynthesis that is happening and the more photons of light that it's getting, the faster it can complete that cycle of photosynthesis. So it may just need more frequent watering. This is normally not an issue, it's just something you'd have to kind of adjust your plant care routine with and just water more often. This also just depends on the plant. Certain plants like cacti and succulents won't really need to be increased in the watering schedule because they're plants that are used to that kind of environment. But I'm talking about if you're changing environments or you just kind of know your plants and then something changes and you might notice that it may be just requiring more frequent watering due to higher levels of light. This is why in the winter months, if you've seen my winter care tips video, that the less light that they're getting, you don't want to be watering as frequently. So it's kind of the same in the summer when the light levels are higher, you might want to increase your watering frequency. So just as a side note, I want to talk about sun stressing. Now this is a sign that your houseplant is getting a lot of light, but it's not necessarily a sign that the houseplant or plant is getting too much light. So I just want to differentiate between that. Sun stressing is not necessarily a bad thing. In many cases, it doesn't harm the plant, it's just a plant adjusting to higher levels of light. This is so frequent in Hoyas. If you have Hoyas, you may have experienced them changing colour or the leaves going red or more brown and just adjusting to higher levels of light. This is just an adaptation that the plant has to harsh levels of light or higher levels of light. And basically what this is all leaves have a pigment called anthocyanin, and this pigment is present in all leaves. But when a plant is getting like the right conditions, it's getting sufficient light that it needs, this pigment won't be activated. So this is only activated once the plant starts getting into harsher light levels or light levels that are in excess. So this basically kicks in to protect the leaf tissue from too much UV damage, and it does that by changing the pigment of the leaf, which I have to say is so cool. I think that is so cool that they can do that. It's basically a mechanism that kicks in when it needs it to protect itself from damage and to help in its survival, which is just so cool. It's so cool. A lot of people might actually want to deliberately sun stress their plants because it looks so beautiful. I do that quite frequently with my Hoyas, but you have to remember that try to do it a little bit gradually, to not like just go from a dark corner to a super highlight area. That will just stress it out, and it could lead to some of the other signs we talked about, like leaf burn and bleaching of the leaves and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. Always do things gradually with plants. They're on a slower time scale to us. Sign number 5 is actually only something that I've read about, but I thought I would include it here. It's not something I've necessarily experienced, but sign number 5 is wrinkly or kind of textured leaves. As with all plant care, these kinds of signs can also mean different things, and that's why it's always so hard to answer people's questions on this kind of stuff, because you really need to know their conditions and know their kind of plant care habits in order to figure out what the issue is. But obviously textured and crinkly leaves can mean that your plant is not getting enough water. Like I've talked about recently in my root rot video, crinkly Hoya leaves in particular may mean that it has root rot, may mean that it's really thirsty. But I have read some things online saying that if your plant leaves become textured or crinkly, it's basically kind of bubbling up from the harsh light exposure. And then over time, this can kind of increase to just become a crispy leaf, a burnt up crispy old leaf. So sign number 6 is kind of little changes in growth habits. So this is something I have noticed in particular with my begonias that are on the windowsill, that while adjusting to the higher light levels, the new leaves are a little bit, maybe a bit deformed and smaller than they normally would be in slightly lower light levels. It's adjusted to the light levels and it knows, okay, I don't need to make really big leaves because I'm getting a lot of sun and it's actually too much for me, so I can get away with having a smaller leaf and less leaf tissue to capture that sun. So that's something I've noticed, and it's something I've definitely trying to adjust with my plants. I have been getting smaller growth on a lot of things. So that may be another reason why. Like I've discussed, these issues could be many different things, and it's kind of up to you to assess your conditions, your plant care habits, and get to know your plants and what conditions that they would normally thrive in the wild in order to kind of figure out what the issues are. But this may help you if you have other things down and you can't figure out what's going on with your plant. Too much sun may be the cause of some of these issues that you're experiencing while your plants are growing. Or not growing, or maybe they're dead and crispy and you've just fried it and you don't understand why. This may be why. So obviously the way that I'm dealing with this is giving my plants less light. That might be taking it out from underneath the grow light. It might be moving them away from the window. It might be just pushing them a little bit further away from the light source and seeing how they adjust and how they grow. I've had a lot of positive things happen since doing that, in particular with my begonias. The leaves have been less bleached. They have produced bigger leaves. My other plants, like my Hoyas and stuff like that, they've just started kind of thriving when I've just pulled away from the light that little bit more. So I hope this was helpful. Any questions that you have about this that I didn't answer in the video, do leave them below. If you're still struggling with something, just ask me in the comments and I'll try my best to get back to you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye.